2, 1. Liberty Hangout.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Liberty Hangout podcast, today in conjunction with Being Libertarian. My name is Justin, and I'm the founder of libertyhangout.org. And I'm also joined by...
I'm Charles Peralo, the co-founder of beinglibertarian.com, and we are here with a very special guest today, John McAfee, who is currently seeking the LP nomination for president. He was currently running for the Cyber Party's nomination, but he switched to join the LP, 50-year-old third party. The previous nominees have been David Koch, Gary Johnson, and Bob Barr. With that, he is an entrepreneur, and we're ready to hear more from him.
And we must also add in that we are among the very first to actually talk to John about his presidential campaign. So thank you so much for joining us today, John. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so first question, you're in the tech industry. You've been in there. Just a little background on myself. I actually have 2 patents. I'm an inventor. Where do you stand on the issue of intellectual property? Do you align a little bit more with Stefan Kinsella and perhaps Dan Bricklin, the creator of VisiCal, or are you in the Ayn Rand, Tom Macy side? What do you think of IP? What do you think of patents?
Well, here's the thing. I think none of us have original ideas. I've never had one. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and intellectual property then would have to extend back through history to the Stone Age. There are many countries that survive quite well without intellectual property laws. China is one, and it's a major one, and it's a power that we're facing on the cyber front right now. We're ill prepared to deal with them, I think, largely because of our intellectual property laws and because of the interference of the NSA and others in our own ability to protect ourselves from a cyber standpoint.
I mean, they oftentimes say that 90% of the greatest innovations in the computer industry happened before any IP was in that space. Also, you go back to the Wright brothers. You go back to Edison versus Tesla. Numerous examples where IP sort of stood in the way. But still, this is perhaps, next to perhaps Israel versus Palestine, the most heavily debated thing in the libertarian community. Why do you think that is? Why have some libertarians stuck with Ayn Rand? Why are some going over to Kinsella? What do you think is happening here?
Well, we're all self-serving as individuals, whether you want to believe it or not. We all have the same frailties of greed and power. We have fear and hatred, as well as love and hopes and dreams. We're a mixed bag of things. So if it serves you, if intellectual property serves you, if, for example, you're in the music industry, then you're going to be standing behind it. If you go ahead.
And I can tell you from personally trying to license out 2 patents right now, the idea of getting checks while big companies use your product and your IP, that is tempting, I will admit.
Yeah, so it depends on where you stand. I mean, it's like every issue in life. If you're a marijuana smoker and you're smoking daily and it's part of your lifestyle, you're going to be in favor of legalizing marijuana. But I like to look at things a little differently. It has nothing to do with specifics. It has to do with generalities of the human condition that we refuse to accept. Let's look at things that we do with our bodies, for example. The things we do with them and the things that we do to them. It has been impossible throughout history to legislate those things away. The era of prohibition, where alcohol was absolutely prohibited, there was more consumption of alcohol than since the Goths invented beer.
That is very true. So moving on past that, though, Justin, you have a question.
So tailing off of intellectual property, another highly contested issue in libertarian realms is the non-aggression principle. Now, we had Austin Peterson on our program last month, who's also seeking the Libertarian Party nomination, and he's gone out of his way to actually oppose the NAP. Now, what are your thoughts on the non-aggression principle? Are our rights apparent in nature, or do you, like Austin, subscribe to a consequentialist belief?
Well, the non-aggression principle in the Libertarian Party began, I think, with with fear of the U.S. government. I mean, the Libertarians were viewed as a possible extremist terrorist organization to begin with, and by creating that principle, it assuaged or put that issue slightly behind them. What does that actually mean? Non-aggression. We are an aggressive species. All species are aggressive, and aggression is a necessary part of existence. If our borders are breached, if we are not as aggressive as the aggressor, then we will simply disappear. Again, as I understand it, it was a political motive behind including that into the Libertarian Party. But it's not, six of one, half a dozen of the other. What does it actually mean? How is it implemented? Obviously, we want to avoid force if at all possible in life. We have to do that. But if the police are not, go ahead.
So you're saying, so while well-intentioned this might be, you would not sign the pledge like some libertarians have and some libertarians have not.
I don't think I would sign the pledge without further clarification. I need to understand what that actually means.
Yeah, I think the major premise as far as Rothbardian circles go is that the NAP circles around self-ownership. Would you agree that self-ownership is a phenomenon apparent in nature?
Oh, absolutely. It's inherent in every aspect of nature. I mean, lions have their territories. That's what they own. And the ants on that territory own that territory too. But it's ownership of territory, ownership of property is fundamental throughout every aspect of life.
I mean, this is perhaps one of the most debated things in libertarianism as well, because you have the anarcho-capitalist belief where you align much more with Mises or Rothbard. Then you have more of a minarchist, David Bose, Gary Johnson, Rand Paul, and you follow sort of that line. So there's been a discussion a lot of people have had over the last few, decades really. And just having this non-aggression principle, it's perhaps the first time really that this debate has happened, largely due to Austin.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Oh, there was not really a question. There was just a continuation on that. And but really overall looking at this, how do you see unity here?
How
would you see a unity in between these people who are saying, okay, self-ownership, non-aggressive principle, anarcho-capitalism, and then people who are a little bit more moderate out, they accept the idea of a government, they're a bit more minarchist?
Well, we have to have a government. To assume that we can exist in a society without some sort of governing body is not possible. I mean, I think the most libertarian people in history were the founders of our Constitution. I mean, they had just fought a war against oppression and overbearance against England. I mean, they understood this very well, and yet they understood the need for government. They also understood that power corrupts and corrupts absolutely, and they knew that government would become powerful. They put into the Constitution a fail-safe. It's Article 5. Push this button, start over. We just never pushed that button.
And it would never make much sense for somebody running for president to say there should be no government at all. But some libertarians in the party have tried that over the years. The campaign to run and end government.
Oh, Adam Kokesh is running in 2020 on the platform of having no government.
And we wish him the best.
Here's the issue with 2020, by the way. There may be no government by 2020. I mean, for example, Social Security comes due then. There's $2.6 trillion in Social Security that has been spent by our, quote, government. It has to be paid back on 2020. Well, we're already $18 trillion in debt. Where's that going to come from?
And just trying to focus in on this point on Social Security, what would be your immediate reform there?
For Social Security?
Yes.
And absolutely no immediate reform there. I mean, here's the issue. You have to be practical. If, in fact, you want to become president of this country, you have to get votes. Look at the reality. This is why Social Security is an untouchable issue for every party and every person. If you remove Social Security benefits, you remove, number one, a huge voting block of those who are on Social Security. They're not going to vote.
25%. About 25% of voters and 40% of primary voters.
That's fine. So but that's not the issue. The issue is their children and their grandchildren. For example, you're the average American, and your mom's living quite happily on Social Security, across town. If her Social Security is removed, she's going to be living with you. Okay? So it's every voter. Every voter. No one is ever going to vote for you if you say we're removing Social Security. But let us look at the reality. There will be no Social Security after 2020. I don't care what anybody thinks. And I don't think there's a single man, woman, or child under the age of 45 who believes that they will ever get Social Security. This thing will solve itself. But to get out there and say, I am going to reduce benefits or I'm going to stop benefits, then go home. We're not going to become a party. We're not going to become a power. We will become an ideology. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in an ideology that is able to manifest itself.
Now, with the idea of grandmothers and grandfathers moving in with their kids, basically everybody becomes an Italian family, I guess, because of that.
And that's fine, but maybe some people don't want that. Maybe some people are happy with their mom and pop living across town and not with them.
Yeah, no, quite a few are not happy with that. I could trust you on. I could believe you on that. But for some sort of reform, I mean, obviously, some sort of reform has to happen. I mean, would you make any proposal there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There has to be some sort of personal retirement plan, which we are all responsible for. But it's going to take dozens of years to implement that. You need to understand, change of this nature does not happen overnight. But we have to start
I mean, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, they have called for some sort of Social Security privatization. You think that's just a fantasy to get some Tea Party voters?
And it's what it will have to become, but it can't become that overnight. This is what you need to understand, because those who are currently on Social Security, at age 65, they may live for another 20 years or 30. Okay, I'm sorry, you can't touch that. You cannot. It was something. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're not for full abolishing like some libertarians are. You want a more meaningful reform where the people currently on it or the people expecting benefits, they can continue to receive, but get younger people out.
Yes, absolutely. Figure out a way to get the younger people, get it privatized, and fund your own. Because we'll end up with more money, and no one can steal it that way. Because really, the $2.6 trillion in there, it's gone. It's IOUs that the government has written, and they're in a box somewhere in a closet.
And also, they've showed some paperwork on Social Security. They've showed if you were to put the money in just a general fund in the Dow or NASDAQ, put all the money the average person puts into Social Security, you get more.
But we get much more. Well, we get much more than nothing, because right now there's nothing there. We are borrowing to pay it. Yeah. So here's the issue. Because it was a governmental trust, all right, which the government could borrow from. That was mistake number one. There's nothing there. Nothing there.
Now, the average person who's retired makes, I believe, over $33,000 a year, but the average amount Social Security contributed to that was $13,000. So the majority of funds the average retired person makes actually do come from 401ks. They do come from the market. Why do you think people like Bernie Sanders are out there just saying, oh, let's expand Social Security. I don't know how people retire. And then they're saying, oh, let's tax Wall Street. Let's tax the thing that gives seniors the majority of income.
Well, I'm not interested in trying to explain someone else's thought process. I don't know why Bernie Sanders does these things. You'll have to ask him. I can explain my thought processes.
And very few people could explain Bernie Sanders' thought process. I don't think he could either. So moving on, though, outside of that, just trying to focus on issues that libertarians discuss, things that do come up in the party nomination. One thing that there's always been the joke in the libertarian community of who will build the roads, infrastructure, and some libertarians like Walter Block have said the private sector can build the roads. We should have privatization of the current roads that exist. And then you go to, let's say, Peter Schiff, an economist from Connecticut, and he will say, no, the government should still be in the business of building roads. Where do you stand on that? What do you think the best solution is?
Well, let's get real for a second. Do you actually believe that private industry in a country composed of individual states with individual laws and individual special interests, and there will always be special interests. You can't get rid of that. That's part of the human condition. Do you think it is possible for a private company to actually build national roads, national highways? Absolutely not. It can't be done. I mean, that's pie in the sky. That's pipe dreams.
The Walmart road.
On an acid trip, perhaps. But when you get straight again, you go, whoa, hopefully you go, whoa. So no, that can't be done. It's simply not practical. It's simply not possible. I wish it were, but it's not.
Now, Italy has about 60% of their roads actually privatized. The state of Indiana transferred their largest highway systems to privatization with Mitch Daniels as governor. They did that. The roads actually, for the first time, brought profitability in 50 years, and consumers were actually paying less money because they did other tactics, such as automated tolls. They did better cleaning technology. And they also they built another premium lane of sorts where you can go faster, and they also time things differently. So do you think there's some room for privatization? Maybe not so much in the building end, but you can send over contracts.
But look at your examples. You chose Italy. I mean, I've been to Italy many times. It's the size of Virginia. And you gave examples of individual states where the state government could mandate and assure that the road could be built through all of the various communities and the counties and what have you and people's land. No. You still have to have some sort of government. It worked in Italy because the government mandated it for the entire country. We have individual states. If you get rid of the federal government, you still have some sort of state government or not. You still have interest in all of these different areas. To try to get everybody together would be impossible. So in both of these instances, there was still some governmental involvement. And we're talking about national now, crossing many states.
Okay, now some people in the libertarian community have said, let's avoid the federal government, let's keep it state and local government when it comes to roads, bridges. How do you feel there? Do you think the federal government should have a play in the infrastructure? What do you think?
The same thing with highways. I mean, if you have something that crosses state lines, then how do you manage that? Because one state says, I don't want it, and the other state says, I do want it. So you're going to have an interstate highway going from one end of Indiana to the other and then stop. That is simply not going to work.
Okay, so you think there has to be some sort of federal oversight here. Now, what do you think of eminent domain in this play? Because Gary Johnson, who was governor of New Mexico, he took a very unlibertarian stance, and he did endorse the use of eminent domain to go through roads and actually affect people's property there. He took the Donald Trump stance.
Well, you can't build roads without eminent domain. How can you do it? What if all the farmers in Kansas say, no, you're not going to cross my land? Then there's no roads in Kansas.
Well, then they'd have to get big. Well, then the libertarians' argument of who will build the roads, we might have to actually have the year 2015 Marty McFly flying through the skies, and I don't know how practical that is.
Well, all I'm saying is that if with hundreds of millions of people with hundreds of millions of different interests and beliefs, if there is not something managing the building of roads will simply not get built, not from one part of the country to the other. You'll get in one county or in one state or in one region, and then they will stop.
All right.
So it's terrible. It's a terrible concept to have the state say, we're taking your land to build a road.
All right. So right now, if you look at the infrastructure, it might not be crumbling like how the Obama administration has said, but clearly there are problems here. Some highways could get better. Some roads can get better. What do you think is the best thing for the federal government to do? And also, do you think the answer might have to be something in terms of deregulation? Let's say what Google is doing with self-driving cars or what Tesla is doing there. What do you think is the actual solution here to a better infrastructure for America?
Well, first of all, we need a smaller infrastructure. If you look at where we're spending our money, we are a socialist country. I don't care what you want to say, because our budget is $3.8 trillion a year. 1.1 trillion of that goes to the Department of Health and Human Services, a purely socialist organization. The next largest is Social Security, unfortunately, at $730 billion. Next is the Department of Defense at a little over 500. Next we have the Department of Labor, the next one is at 139 billion, is the Department of Agriculture, which basically uses money to pay farmers not to grow crops. The next one is the Department of Labor, a purely socialist organization. So 3/4 of our budget is for socialist programs. We're a socialist country. Now that's got to, if you as a libertarian want to change things, that's got to be reversed. So the first thing we have to do is look at the largest programs and cut from those things the things that are completely useless, that were built as legacy systems. And in the government, there is no such thing as a legacy system. Once you create a program or a department, it will exist forever, because you have a manager and a director and of someone in charge who gets a salary and has huge power. So that has to stop. It has to stop.
So,
and it'll be a painful process.
as president, would you push to try to abolish any of these wasteful agencies, or would you instead try to make meaningful and practical reforms to try to cut back at them?
Okay, here's the problem you're going to have. In abolishing an agency, you have to lay off tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. Let's take some examples, however. Why don't we try to think outside the box? Let's look at the Department of the Transportation Security Administration. Now, I don't think anybody believes it's an effective department. Marshals, U.S. Marshals, consistently get hand grenades and guns and all kinds of things through. And let's remember, 9/11 was not done with machine guns. They had box cutters as weapons, for heaven's sake. So wouldn't we be better off with air marshals on airplanes, or something far less expensive than $7 billion a year, which is their budget? Now let's look at that budget. $7 billion a year. $1.5 billion is for salaries. What if we abolished the department, sent everybody home, but continued to pay their salary? Now, just bear with me for a second. We just now saved $5.5 billion on a program which is completely useless. We take some of that money, we beef up the air marshals, which are already on airplanes, and I believe we'll have far greater security. Now, what do we do with those people? Let's say we sent them home. Let's not worry about that for now. We've got, and by the way, that's 50,000 people. We're paying their salaries, they're home, they're fishing, they're whatever they want to do. Let's say next year, you want to start a business, but you don't have any money, but it's a great idea, and you need employees. And there are some people that we've just laid off from the government, but we're still paying, that say, okay, you now work for this guy, and we're going to give you 2 years. You'd better make some money at the end of this 2 years, because we're going to expect you to start paying the salaries now. So we have given you a jump start in business. We have kept some people employed. We have not put anybody on unemployment rolls. There's no starving children. There's nobody losing their houses. We have saved money, and we have jump started some businesses. You can do that across the board. 15% of the federal budget goes to wages. The rest is overhead, for heaven's sake.
And
So,
also, you could take places like, you could say, okay, this was the office of the Department of Education. We're renting it out, and now that's revenue coming into the government, new
Absolutely.
revenue instead of expenses.
Absolutely.
So you're saying a mass severance package, essentially buying out the federal workers, saying, hey, you know what, we don't think your department does a good job anymore. We're still going to pay you. Nobody's going to go starve, and you're going to have the same exact lifestyle you've had, and for the foreseeable future as well. And hey, get employed, good luck, here you go for, let's say, the next 2 to 10 years.
We're going to help you get employed by starting if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have the money and you can't borrow the money for paying wages, and there are employees sitting at home that used to work for the TSA and they can do the job, put them to work for you for free for 2 years. Give you a jump start, let you start this business. If you're successful, you start paying their salaries.
That sounds something like a very well-handled way to manage a cut. And also, it sounds like it would get a lot of these people who you are removing from the system to get a better handle on management. Now, one thing is, welfare is a fairly large percent of the budget, maybe not as large as some people in the Ann Coulter, Donald Trump community believe. Would you favor some sort of workfare instead of welfare program, like what you're proposing here, what to do with federal workers?
And by the way, unlike Social Security, where everybody's going to vote, okay, I promise you, that everyone on both Social, not everyone, the greatest percentage of voters that are on the Social Security rolls. Unlike that, people on welfare don't vote. Not that I'm being heartless or
you're following the facts. You're following statistics.
Right, and so yes, let's put those people to work. Let's find some programs, because you're sitting home now because you can't get a job. Well, let's create some jobs, for Christ's sakes.
And Maine, they introduced a plan where you have to work just 6 hours a week. They saw welfare enrollment go down, I believe, 20% within the first 2 months, and the people who were on it actually found full-time employment.
Yes, of course. Come on. We are inviting people not to work in this country, like we're paying farmers not to grow food. Now, what do these farmers do? We don't want you growing cotton. Okay, so we're going to pay you money not to grow cotton. Great, I've still got the land. I'm going to grow soybeans. So I double my salaries. I double my income. That's insane. So no, you're absolutely right, because you're inviting me not to work. If I can go out and get a job that makes less money than what you're going to pay me on welfare, I'm going to sit home and watch TV.
Now, speaking on welfare just for a moment, Milton Friedman proposed a negative income tax. A few countries have actually adopted that. What do you think of the negative income tax as a replacement to welfare? Okay, so same thing right there. So you would say you're.
I'm not interested in what we call sitting home getting money. I'm not interested in what we call that. I'm interested in how to stop it and how to make us a more productive country. And like you said, if you make people work just a few hours a week, they're going to get off welfare. They're going to figure out something else to do.
So you think the social safety net currently is a net in the sense it traps people, which, looking at how 25% of people on food stamps or welfare have been there for over 3 years, that does seem apparent. You want to make it more of a social safety rocket where it gets you back up.
Yes, yeah. Let's prick you back up, get you back in the workforce, and get you productive, and get us a power in the world again. You know why we're a power? It's not because we are efficient and because we are productive, because we're not. We are a service industry. We are a service country. No, it's because we have the bombs, we have the guns, we have the battleships, we have the nukes, we have the stealth fighters. That's why we're a power. How long can that last? Think about this for a minute.
All right. And now the next question will go to Justin.
All right, so while we are on the topic of welfare, I think that, as Charles alluded to earlier, Bernie Sanders actually wants to expand the welfare state instead of taking any meaningful approaches to help people gain their independence and get back on their feet and be productive members of society. And so obviously him and Donald Trump are running the most visibly anti-capitalist and anti-liberty campaigns in this presidential race. And for some reason or whatever, there are some libertarians that are actually supporting them. What do you think the reason for this support of campaigns antithetical to the principles of liberty is, and what do you think of Bernie and Donald yourself?
Well, again, I don't know either of these men. I've never had dinner with them. I've never gone fishing with them. I've never had a meaningful discussion. I've never debated them. I mean, I don't think I'd want to debate them. There's nothing I can say that will make them vote for me. So I don't know. How can I tell you? All I can look at is the things that they say, which are massively massaged and polished by other people. Get real here. This is how the political system works in the major parties. It has nothing to do with you as the person out there standing in front. It's the machine behind you that's talking. Well, the machine is broken. I don't care what words you are saying. The machine that created and polished those words is just flat broken. You can be Jesus Christ and you join the Republican or the Democratic Party and you become the machine. You have to. So what do I think of them? I don't know them, and I will not comment on that.
All right, now, but here's the thing. You have some ideas of what they've been saying. Bernie obviously is advocating some sort of socialism or social democracy. Donald Trump has been advocating very strict border controls and sort of this will-to-win message. Why do you think libertarians are responding to this? Because some people who were in the Ron Paul camp, they're very happy with those two candidates. R.J. Harris, who was almost the LP nominee at one point, he's gone out to endorse Donald Trump. Wayne Allen Root, who was the VP nominee in 2008, he's endorsed Donald Trump. What do you think is making these guys respond? Do you think these people actually really understood libertarianism or economics, or do you think there's something else going on with that message?
Well, I think it's probably different for every person, and I really don't have a clue. It might be political. It might be looking at the Libertarian Party and the way things have been run and realizing we're never going to get anywhere. I'll just throw my weight behind somebody else. It might be that. It might be a change of heart. Something happened in your life that some of the libertarian beliefs you no longer want to hold. I do not have a clue.
Well, I think that as you had mentioned earlier, John, that a lot of people, well, what you said is that once you join one of the two major parties, you essentially become the machine. So do you think that perhaps a large reason people are supporting these two candidates is because they are seen as outsiders and not part of the establishment machine?
It could possibly be, but do you have to believe me that if they're part of the party, they are part of that machine? They are. Especially the two major parties, they have been machines for 100 years. They have, and so that cannot change.
All right. So moving on, another thing now. Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, they both oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. They're supporting it for pretty similar reasons, and this has been a very widely debated issue in the election cycle. Ben Carson is pro-TPP. Hillary Clinton called it the gold standard of trade deals and now shows opposition for it. Many people, Paul Krugman, who is for it, but some libertarians are for it, some are against it. Have you looked at the deal at all that's being offered, and would you have any stance there? And also, do you favor the promotion of free trade?
Well, obviously, I favor the promotion of free trade. I mean, that's the fundamental basis of capitalism. In terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I do not have a clue. We're in a massive changing world in the world of finance now. Number one, we are going to move very, very soon to a digital currency, whether we like it or not. I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin for a number of reasons, technically most of them, for technological reasons. But we are going to have a digital currency, and it is going to be largely anonymous. And this is going to change the world. The Fed will disappear. The Fed will become completely insignificant. And what is that going to do to the world? I do not know. You don't know.
Well, I was actually in 2011 one of the early adopters of Bitcoin. I invested when it was about $2, a good decision for me, and I helped form an exchange on Wall Street about 2 years ago that's still up and running. Now, I actually do agree with you. Bitcoin might not be the answer, but digital currency, no matter what, will be. What do you think are the problems with Bitcoin? And this is coming from you less as a presidential candidate, more just as somebody who's been in technology for many years. What do you think the flaws are with Bitcoin, and what would you say could improve it?
Good Lord. That would be a 10-hour discussion. But here, let's look
elevator pitch.
Let's look at what has happened with Bitcoin. I mean, how many hundreds of millions of dollars have just simply disappeared due to?
I had about $5,000 disappear due to the what happened with the Mt. Gox exchange. So I can attest.
I mean, that's the reason there. It does not have the safeguards necessary in a digital currency to prevent that from happening. Number two, I mean, the blockchain is perfect, but the mining of coins is becoming very expensive now, and in terms of computing power.
Now, some people have proposed, like myself, I was actually involved in making this proposal, to do a semi-cash currency, but also with the ability to do a digital currency. So basically, you could take a bill, it has the number on it, the bill would be destroyed and then marked as a digital currency that could hold in a phone, and that would be a solution there. Would you be open to looking at something more where the government might have the currency like we do now, but there is a digital back end on it and it operates very similar to Bitcoin? And
no, absolutely not, because the digital age is designed to remove paperwork. It's designed to remove the very things that you're trying to propose there. People are not going to people are just not going to accept it. I mean, I want to be able to push a button and things happen. That's it. Period.
All right,
now, pardon?
Would you be in favor of a government in any form back in a digital currency like Bitcoin?
The governments will have to eventually accept it, whether they back it or not. I do not know. But Bitcoin is beyond and outside the realm of government. It is, and any digital currency will be, and we have to accept that. And this is going to be a massive problem for every nation on the world.
Now, do you think digital currency could be an economic boom in the sense that, hey, all the powers of a bank now are in your phone, and they very likely could be free? So you think there's an economic boom here waiting to happen?
Well, absolutely. Or it could be an economic catastrophe, depending on which currency we choose and how we deal with that. But it's going to change everything. I know this for a fact.
I think that while we are talking about Bitcoin, that actually segues well into the next question I had. So, as President of the United States, what will you do about the Federal Reserve, and will you tolerate competing currencies in the market?
I said earlier that the Federal Reserve will become a non-issue. It will become totally irrelevant when digital currencies come into play. I don't know what will happen to them. They will have to get decent jobs somewhere, I guess, and try to earn an honest living for a change. But for now, it's a monstrosity. But it will solve itself as digital currencies come in. So I'm 7 years old, and the thing that I've learned more than any other is that issues that will solve themselves, let them do it, because there are many that will not. And that's where we have to put our efforts. The Fed will disappear when digital currencies are universally adopted. Fact of life. End of story.
Do you imagine that with the help of the state, the Fed will try to regulate digital currencies in order to maintain their monopoly on their currency?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But have you ever tried herding cats? It's not possible. It just can't be done. So they can try. It will not be possible. This is something that they will have to accept.
We're going to have to ask one question at least about the infrastructure of the internet in this country, because the routers are too slow.
Okay, well, my headquarters is in Opelika, Alabama, which is a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere in Alabama. Why did I choose there? They're one of 6 cities in America that have a 1 gigabit upload and download, fiber optic upload and download to the internet. Come on, we can do this. It requires everybody working together and understanding. But that's not the issue. What scares me is when I hear presidential candidates like Donald Trump go, well, we'll just shut the internet down. I'm not sure he said it to that extent, but
no, he kind of did. He's when Donald Trump, with Donald Trump, whenever he says something, always the extreme.
But that shows that we do not understand. If the internet's down for 2 weeks, we will return to the Stone Ages. We will not have food. This is what people don't understand. The internet is not just a convenience where you and I can chat on a horrible piece of software. It is used for every major service and every major production in this country. We can't deliver food. We can't route the food.
Well, I was in Chattanooga about a year ago. They have, I believe, the 1 gigabit thing, very fast internet there. I mean, what would be your solution on that? I mean, do you want the government involved in infrastructure, or do you support just a deregulation so services like Google Fiber might be able to get more access into major cities and towns?
It has to be deregulated. It has to be.
Okay, so deregulation, you don't want the government coming in, just building. You want the companies coming in. Okay, very well. But
because
I think you made a really interesting point about how if the internet were down for 2 weeks, we would return to the Stone Age because we are that dependent on it. Now, I think that also raises a point that I just realized, that not a lot of Americans realize how vulnerable our power grids are. As president, would you try to stress the importance of strengthening and fortifying our power grids here in the United States?
Well, I think the power grids, 2 years ago, Iran got into one of the power grids in New York State, hacking in. I have a good friend from DEF CON. DEF CON is the largest hacker conference in the world here in Las Vegas. I keynoted it a year ago, or a year and a half ago. I went to it last year. I have a lot of hacker friends. It is so easy using just social engineering, forget technology, to hack into anybody, anywhere these days. And companies are completely unaware. The government is the most unaware. I mean, cybersecurity is my forte. It's my specialty. It's what I've been doing my entire life. So this is an area that I understand. And we are in a tragic situation here. Our Office of Personnel Management was hacked last year. 20 million records of every employee of the U.S. government for the past 50 years was taken by the Chinese. And our response? Well, let's get some consultants in to make our employees feel better about themselves. That was the government response. Madness, absolute madness. So we're not just our power grids, but our entire infrastructure is completely vulnerable to a 14-year-old kid in a foreign country. And we're unaware of this. At least our government is unaware.
So what practical steps would you take in order to fortify this?
We need a cyber defense unit. We need to understand that there are countries and individuals who have been weaponizing software for a dozen years, and
that would be probably a lot more efficient than the $600 billion or so going to defense currently, and the hundreds of billions going to the war on drugs, police, victimless crimes.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because really, the next war is not going to be fought with bombs. It's not. It really isn't. Why would someone waste the time to send a bunch of troops over here when a dozen really smart people using modern-day weaponized software can bring us to our needs? I mean, this is what we have to understand. The next war will be a cyber war, and it will be far more devastating than anything imaginable in a nuclear war. You need to understand this, people. Everyone listening needs to know this simple truth. And we're behind the ball in America because the American government considers its only resource, the hacking community, to be the enemy.
So you would definitely try and matriculate some of the funds that we are putting in defense, some of the money that's going to nukes and so on, and try and get really something that well handled on the security front, the cybersecurity front?
Well, not try. It would be my top priority, number one priority. And the way I would do it is I would set up booths at DEF CON in every single Hack Miami, all of the hacking conventions, and say, look, we're paying 3 times what anyone else is paying. If you'll just come on board and help us, because that's the only solution. I'm sorry. We do not have within the U.S. government the technical competence to fight this war that's coming. We don't.
All right, so going on that, I believe Justin had another question.
So, as we wrap up here, if you win the Libertarian Party nomination, how do you plan on going about your campaign in order to gain attention in the mainstream and make a real impact where you could actually make a large dent in this election? What is your strategy, and why should people support you over, say, Austin Peterson or Gary Johnson?
Well, my strategy will be to take the libertarian principles, and as I've explained in many of your questions, turn them into practicalities that the American public will buy. Because the Libertarian Party has done little more than frighten the American public with its platforms and the way the platforms have been explained. You got to stop doing that. We have to stop doing that. We have to be practical. We have to hold on to our ideals and accept the world as it is today. We're living in a socialist government, and we want to instantly change it into libertarian ideals. Can't happen. Can't happen. Right. I can promise you.
And some libertarians have made people a little bit afraid over the years. For example, many are Alex Jones fans. Many oppose vaccines. Many oppose GMOs. Many think 9/11 was an inside job. What do you stand on those group of people in the movement, and how would you stand on those little things? So,
you mentioned Alex Jones. Alex is a really good friend of mine. I've been on his program a number of times. I've gone gone shooting with him. I like Alex. Alex is extreme. Okay. So as a person, as an individual, I like him. His views and mine, we don't always coincide. But we have to get away from anything that frightens voters. Because if the Libertarian Party wants to actually come to power, you have to have people love you, not fear you. Now, that Machiavelli will say, after you come to power, then that's a good thing, maybe. I don't have a clue. But right now, libertarians are not in power. Fear is not good, and fear is not going to make a president from the Libertarian Party. So my first order of business is to take the party platform and couch it in terminology that people understand as non-threatening. That's going to be a challenge, and I probably will not get everybody behind me, but it has to be done.
All right, so I mean, one thing that also your campaign, from looking at your website, you've made a pretty big issue of is the FDA. I have not seen any candidates on the major parties or in the Libertarian Party bring this issue up. And I think this is a huge issue. I think the FDA might arguably be one of the worst, if not the worst, department in the government. Where do you stand there?
Well, you just spoke it. It is probably the worst department in the government. Well, you cannot stand for freedom to do with your body as you wish and have the existence of the FDA, whose main design is to make sure that you can't do with your body as you wish. Well, that's insane.
Would you still favor some sort of labeling laws, or would you favor basic risk evaluations, but not so much the blocking, but this is just showing the actual risk?
Should be informed. I mean, and we could have a Department of Information to say, look, here's what we found out about this drug. If you take it, your brain will rot and you'll die. But if you want to take it, here. But that's fine. But to say, no, you can't do this because, or we want 20 years of study to make sure that if you take it, all the world is going to be safe. Nonsense. There's no safety in this world. So give me information and let me decide. I mean, my body I don't take drugs anymore, but my body used to be a pharmacology laboratory. I mean, if you gave me a pink pill when I was 30 years old, I would take the thing. All right, so I understand full well the risks of this. We are trying to legislate what people do with their bodies. Instead, we need to legislate how people act after they've done something with their body. For example, if you're having brain surgery, you don't want your neurosurgeon taking LSD while he's operating on you. I mean, I don't want the guy coming in going, what is the brain really? And wouldn't we all be better off without one? I mean, so no, we can't allow that, and so laws that regulate what we do while we're under the influence of anything, those things work. That's why drunk driving laws have worked. They didn't say you can't drink. They just say if you're drinking and you can't walk and see, then you shouldn't be driving this 4,000-pound piece of steel down the highway at 60 miles an hour. Okay,
and you just presented the idea of the liberal arts brain surgeon, by the way. That is a funny thing to imagine right there. But just now, I think wrapping all this up, Justin, I believe you have the last question.
Yeah, just one last question before we close here. I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on Barack Obama's presidency?
I mean, Barack Obama is a liberal Democrat who has usurped powers, I believe. But is it actually his presidency? Let's get back to what the party is, after all. Isn't it the machine's presidency? You know, how much power, if you're in the party, do you actually have as president? You have to believe me. There are so many strings attached to you that defining you as a puppet would be less than the truth. So you know, I'm not fond of what has happened under Barack's presidency, but I will blame the machine than the man.
Well, what I've always argued with Barack Obama is that he's a far better president because he doesn't get anything done. Thank God he does nothing. Would you hold that view?
I've always said that if we sent everybody in government home, that none of us would notice for years. I truly believe that. So.
Very great speaking to you, and wish you the best of luck on your candidacy.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, John. Where can our listeners follow you online so that they can keep up with your campaign?
Go to McAfee16.com. The number 16. Okay? Thank you very much.
Check out McAfee16.com, guys. Thank you so much, John, for coming on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And thank you guys so much for tuning into the Liberty Hangout podcast. Make sure you tune into the Liberty Hangout podcast again this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you subscribe to the Liberty Hangout podcast on iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter at Liberty Hangout, and make sure to check out libertyhangout.org to read some awesome liberty-minded material from a great lineup of writers. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you share if you like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great content, and check out libertyhangout.org for some awesome liberty-minded material from a great lineup of writers.